What could unfold over the course of a single night in the city that never sleeps? On September 20th, 2017, 19-year-old Karina Slusser called her mother, Sabina. She was in Queens, New York, and said she needed to return home to Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania right away. Karina explained that her driver's license and social security card were gone. Both, she claimed, had been stolen. Without those documents, she couldn't purchase a plane ticket. She said she would try to make it home by train instead. Her voice sounded unsteady and nervous, as if she wanted to say more but couldn't force the words out. At the time, Sabina was in Florida, traveling to her own father's funeral, Karina's grandfather. She couldn't return immediately, so she told her daughter to remain inside the hotel and wait. That phone call was the final one Sabina ever received from Karina. Investigators would later discover that later that same night, Karina messaged a man named Giovanni Pig, asking for a place to stay and help leaving. He didn't respond until 3 hours later, and by that time, Karina was no longer answering her phone. After that, Karina Slusser was never seen again. Her case is filled with tangled mysteries where every detail seems important, yet the truth remains unknown. Karina Slusser was born on March 6, 1998, in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Following her parents' divorce, she was raised by her mother, Sabina Tordo. Karina was outgoing, involved in school activities, and performed well academically in high school. She was a cheerleader, kept up with makeup and fashion trends, and ran an Instagram account where she shared photos and captions about her ambitions and future success. Classmates remembered her as cheerful, approachable, and driven. She dreamed of becoming a makeup artist, but the first signs of trouble appeared in 2016. She changed her circle of friends, began skipping classes, and came under the influence of a new group. That year, she was arrested for petty theft. Afterward, her behavior changed noticeably. She grew irritable and started pulling away from her family. Sabina became worried as Karina grew more isolated, began disappearing at night, and returned with expensive items she clearly couldn't afford. By the spring of 2017, Karina was experiencing a serious mental and emotional crisis. In April, she attempted self-harm and was hospitalized. After her release, she moved to Hazleton to live with a friend, hoping to start over. She found work as a server at a casual dining restaurant, likely an Applebee's or something similar. The first few weeks passed quietly. She lived with her friend and earned a modest but independent income. However, she soon developed a desire for easy money. Karina began spending far more than she made, as shown in messages she exchanged with friends. It became known that she started seeing men who provided her with gifts, cash, and help with housing. She initially described herself as a sugar baby. At first, it appeared to be a way to build confidence and make money, but it quickly turned into a dependency. Her financial troubles grew worse, and conflicts with her friend followed. Before long, she found herself without a place to live. By then, her relationship with her mother had completely broken down. Sabina tried to warn her about the dangers of the path she was heading down, but Karina responded with hostility and anger. On Instagram, she continued to present a flawless image, using filters, bold makeup, and captions like, "I'm strong," or "my first apartment." But the truth looked nothing like the images she posted. The places she stayed were unstable. She vanished for long stretches of time, and her posts began to feature photos from random apartments or rundown motels. By the summer of 2017, Karina was in serious danger. Financial insecurity, conflicts with loved ones, and her increasing dependence on meeting men online created the perfect conditions for those who target vulnerable young women. What once seemed like independence and freedom was becoming a chaotic series of choices with no clear escape. At this critical point, she first connected with a 32-year-old man named Giovanni Pajero, who promised her a new life in New York City. On August 19, 2017, Karina Slusser arrived in New York with Giovanni Pajero, the same man she had been messaging in the days leading up to her arrival. She met him there. He was older, spoke with confidence, and presented himself as someone who could help her get back on her feet. On the first day, he drove her to the Harlem Vista Hotel and paid for several nights. He claimed it was only temporary, until they found her a permanent apartment and a job. Karina didn't object. She was in an unfamiliar city and knew no one. For the time being, she relied on his promises. The first 2 days went smoothly under his guidance. Pajero brought her food, accompanied her to the pharmacy and stores, and gradually began telling her who she should and shouldn't speak to. He started involving himself in her phone calls. Her personal documents eventually ended up in his possession, supposedly so he could arrange an apartment lease. He read her messages, criticized her photos, and commented on her interactions with other men. Karina didn't immediately realize that this supposed fresh start was turning into dependence. By August 21st, the first arguments had started. He became irritated over her messages, accused her of disappointing him, and demanded she behave properly. Karina was only allowed to leave the hotel if he accompanied her. He refused to let her be alone for long. He blocked her friends' numbers, spoke badly about her mother, and insisted that everyone around her was only using her. She gradually lost contact with the outside world. On August 25th, the first documented act of violence took place. According to a police report, Pajero attacked Karina in their Harlem Vista hotel room, shoved her onto the bed, grabbed her by the neck, and screamed at her. According to Karina, the dispute began over $300 he had stolen from her. She went to the police, and when officers arrived, they documented her bruises and recorded her statement. Pajero was arrested and taken to the station, where he was charged with choking and assault. After his arrest, Karina was left completely isolated. She had no identification, no money, and no support system. The hotel room was only paid for a few more days, and soon she was forced to leave. In messages to friends, Karina claimed she had everything under control and was managing on her own. In reality, her circumstances continued to deteriorate. Without her documents, she couldn't get a job, rent housing, or receive official assistance. Karina Slusser remained in New York, and returning home was not something she even considered. Her relationship with her mother was too fractured to repair. She began looking for places to sleep online, connecting with men through apps and social media. While her Instagram still displayed smiling photos and uplifting quotes, the reality was far different. She was spending nights in the homes of strangers, men she had met online. They offered temporary shelter or assistance, but in exchange expected her attention or what they called friendship. This kind of help was neither safe nor stable and only increased her vulnerability. Some of the men she communicated with shared her information with others, requested explicit photos, and even suggested posting ads of her online. By early September 2017, her images began appearing on escort service websites. The photos were likely taken without her consent, and although no names were attached, her friends immediately recognized her. The contact numbers in the ads changed frequently, and some of the photos were edited. Even though she didn't yet have a permanent handler, the process of drawing her into the underground world was already underway. Whether she fully understood it or not, it was during this period that Isaiah "Icy" Homer contacted her. He knew Pajero and, as later became apparent, had ties to the same circles. Homer offered her help recovering after the incident, along with temporary housing, protection, and support. He presented himself as experienced and caring, persuading Karina to move into the Haven Motel in Queens. Officially, it was meant to be a short stay, but in reality it marked the first step toward full dependence on a new protector. Within the first few days at the Haven Motel, Homer began posting ads using her photos. He set the prices, wrote the descriptions, and controlled who was allowed to contact her. Karina was forced to comply and follow his rules. Their messages showed complete control. Homer demanded constant updates, insisted on obedience, and viewed himself as her savior. Her movements were tightly limited, and her phone was monitored at all times. She was gradually losing whatever independence she had left. There were other girls staying at the motel as well. Tensions grew between them as they competed over clients' attention and influence. Karina also became involved in conflicts and occasionally tried to act on her own, but she quickly backed down because she didn't know where to seek help. By then, her identity was tied to multiple online accounts and phone numbers, and she was trapped in a system of exploitation. Legally, she could have walked away, but in reality, she had no resources to escape. September 20th, 2017 was the last day she was seen in public. Witnesses and surveillance footage confirmed that she was seen leaving the motel. From that point on, her disappearance began, and she was officially listed as missing. By then, she was already deeply entangled in a situation completely controlled by someone else. What began as an offer of help ended with her losing all control over her own life. When Karina stopped responding to messages, no one immediately realized she was missing. The chaos surrounding her life made her silence seem normal. Friends assumed she had changed her phone number, and her mother believed she was simply upset. It wasn't until several days later that it became clear this disappearance was more than just another break in communication. Sabina Tordo returned from Florida at the end of September and found her home disturbingly quiet. Her daughter wasn't replying to messages. Karina's personal belongings, the items she had left behind before going to New York, were still there, untouched. That was when Sabina contacted the Bloomsburg Police Department. Initially, the case was recorded as a voluntary disappearance of an adult. However, after Sabina provided a copy of the protective order against Giovanni Pajero, along with letters that arrived after his arrest, the case was transferred to New York authorities. Investigators began following digital and financial traces. One of the first locations they traced led to the Haven Motel in Queens. The manager confirmed that a girl matching Karina's description had stayed there in September with a younger man who paid in cash. She rarely spoke and appeared exhausted. She was last seen on the 20th. After that, the room remained vacant for 2 days until housekeeping entered. Inside, police found a few personal belongings: makeup, a pharmacy receipt, and an empty purse. But her phone, identification documents, and clothes were missing. Investigators also learned that the room had been booked under a false name. The payments were traced back to Homer's debit card. When questioned, he told officers that Karina had left on her own. He denied any further involvement and was unable to provide an address or explain where she was going. He only claimed that she had been talking to someone from the Bronx. By that time, his phone had been wiped and the SIM card replaced. A digital forensic analysis revealed that in the week before her disappearance, Karina had accessed escort service websites from her phone. Although the listings featuring her photos had already been removed, cached versions were recovered. They had been posted from IP addresses in the Bronx and Queens, the same areas where Homer and his network operated. Investigators discovered that the accounts used to publish the ads were created in batches, sharing similar descriptions, language patterns, and photos of different women. As the investigation continued, authorities uncovered links to individuals connected to Pajero. One person confirmed that Karina had worked with their group for a period of time before another man took control. That man matched Homer's description. This marked the first confirmation for law enforcement that both men were part of the same network, though there was still a lack of solid evidence. No abuse had been formally reported, and Karina was legally an adult. By November 2017, investigators began to suspect that Karina may have been taken out of New York entirely. They searched train stations, bus terminals, and nearby surveillance footage, but found no evidence of movement. The final phone ping occurred late at night on September 20th in the Bronx. After that, her device went silent permanently. The investigation stalled, with the same 3 names repeatedly appearing in reports: Slusser, Pajero, and Homer. Everything traced back to that final day. After that, only theories remained. She may have left voluntarily, something tragic could have happened, or she may have been transferred to another network. None of these possibilities could be confirmed. Sabina Tato refused to wait quietly as the official investigation slowed to a crawl. She became a persistent voice, determined to ensure the world remembered that her daughter Karina was a real person, not just another missing case. She began with small steps: Facebook posts, calls to journalists, and letters to the police. At first, she received little more than routine responses. The investigation is ongoing, but Sabina felt the case fading into silence. She started reaching out to others, including online communities focused on missing persons. Karina's photos began appearing on forums in New York City and in public groups on Craigslist. Sabina searched the listings herself, looking for anything that seemed familiar. At times, she thought she recognized Karina in altered appearances or from different angles. She passed every possible lead to investigators, who always said they would follow up. By November 2017, Sabina realized something had to change. The case needed public attention. She went public, speaking with local television stations in Pennsylvania and sharing details about Pajero's arrest and the last confirmed day Karina stayed at the Haven Motel. It marked the first real breakthrough. The story began to spread online, and strangers started reaching out. Some claimed they had seen Karina on the subway, while others mentioned a girl who looked like her in Atlantic City. Sabina forwarded every tip to investigators, who recorded dozens of unverified leads. Each one reinforced the same point. This case could not be ignored. Sabina launched a page called Help Find Karina Slusser and began raising money to offer a reward for information. Within a month, the page attracted thousands of followers. Volunteers stepped in to help design flyers and post listings. Sabina traveled to New York, putting up posters throughout the Bronx and Queens. At one point, she even received a citation for unauthorized posting. "Let them find me," she said in an interview, "as long as people see her face." At the same time, a legal battle was beginning to take shape. Sabina hired an attorney and pushed to have the case included in a federal anti-trafficking initiative. She succeeded in getting it reclassified, no longer as a voluntary departure, but as a high-risk missing person case with suspected exploitation. That shift changed everything. Homeland Security became involved, investigating Homer's connections, searching for other possible victims, and monitoring similar criminal networks. In one of her letters to the district attorney, Sabina wrote, "My daughter is not gone. She disappeared into a system you're too afraid to name. Bring her back to me. Alive or not, just bring her back." That letter was later quoted in a CNN report. National media finally began paying attention. Karina's name was added to the Federal Missing Persons Database in December 2017, and the FBI announced a $10,000 reward for information. The story spread nationwide. Sabina found herself overwhelmed. Her daughter's name was everywhere, yet Karina herself remained unreachable. Under pressure from the media, Homer was brought in for another round of questioning. Once again, he denied any involvement. His lawyers argued that Karina was an adult who made her own decisions. He claimed he had not seen her after September 20th and did not know where she went. Then came a breakthrough. One of Homer's former acquaintances, another young woman, contacted Sabina and her attorney. She shared disturbing details about how things truly operated: manipulation, threats, and strict rules. She said Homer kept the girls in debt and treated leaving without permission as a betrayal. This was the first unofficial confirmation that Karina had not been acting of her own free will. Sabina never stopped. She visited shelters, spoke with staff at victim support organizations, showed Karina's photo, and left her contact information at every stop. She repeated the same words, "I won't stop until I know what happened to her." By January 2018, other mothers began reaching out to Sabina. Their daughters had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. The stories echoed online connections, promises of opportunity, a trip to New York, and sudden silence. Sabina came to a painful realization: her daughter's case was not isolated. She began working closely with anti-trafficking organizations and giving public statements. In one speech, she spoke directly to parents, saying, "Don't think this can't happen to your family. It can happen to any daughter in any home." By then, Sabina understood the possibilities. Karina might have been taken, might have lost her life, or could be hiding somewhere, too afraid to come back. But as long as no body was found, there was still hope, and Sabina fought to keep that hope alive. Not only for herself, but for everyone around her. Meanwhile, investigators continued collecting everything they could, identifying every person potentially involved, every online account, and every IP address that might have been connected to Karina. Still, no major breakthrough emerged. She had vanished in a city where hundreds of people go missing. The evidence remained unclear. Witness accounts were inconsistent, and nothing was strong enough to support formal charges. Sabina pressed on independently. She documented everything, every call, every message, every new detail. That timeline eventually became the foundation of a public database mapping Karina's disappearance almost hour by hour. It was Sabina's relentless effort that kept the case from fading into obscurity. While investigators remained quiet, she spoke out as the city moved on. She reminded people that her voice had become the last one speaking for a daughter no one else could hear anymore. When Karina Slusser's case went federal, multiple agencies became involved, including the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and Homeland Security. Their working theory was that her disappearance was connected to sexual exploitation. That classification opened the door to broader investigative tools, from telecom records to restricted databases used by classified ad platforms. Agents began analyzing her digital footprint through IP addresses and phone number tracking. They identified dozens of ads featuring Karina's images. Some were posted in October and November 2017, after she had already disappeared, suggesting that someone was still using her likeness. Even though the listings didn't name her, there were exact matches in poses, angles, and even identifiable marks on her body. The phone numbers linked to the ads changed frequently, but several had already been flagged in previous criminal investigations involving prostitution. The FBI found that many of the numbers were masked through call forwarding services. Further analysis showed that some of these lines were registered under the names of women previously connected to Isaiah I.C. Homer. This allowed agents to expand the list of potential accomplices and revealed that Homer's operation was organized and far-reaching, not the work of a single individual. The scheme involved fake ads, the use of proxies, and renting housing under forged documents. Search warrants were issued for digital devices belonging to Homer and his known associates. The data recovered from seized smartphones provided critical evidence, including photos of Karina Slusser, encrypted chats with clients, and audio messages containing direct orders and threats. Investigators also uncovered group chats discussing prices, meeting locations, and the frequency of encounters. One phrase, "she can't say no," appeared in several messages. When combined with statements from other victims, it confirmed that Karina Slusser had no control over her choices and was coerced into participation. The FBI conducted dozens of interviews. Women who had worked with Homer provided mixed accounts. Some were terrified, others had left earlier, and a few still felt the pressure. Some said they had heard him mention Karina's name. Others claimed to have seen her photo on his phone. A few admitted that Homer would sometimes rotate ad listings among different girls based on availability or how much clients were willing to pay. This could explain why Karina's name and likeness continued circulating long after her disappearance. At the same time, investigators tracked transportation activity and reviewed surveillance footage around Queens and the Bronx that placed Isaiah Homer near the Haven Motel. The analysis showed that on the day Karina disappeared, Homer was seen leaving the motel alone, carrying no bags or personal items. Despite his repeated claims that he didn't know where she went, the timeline of his actions told a different story. Law enforcement obtained motel entry logs and call records, which confirmed that after September 20th, Homer continued using Karina's phone number. This detail directly contradicted his account and strengthened suspicions that he was withholding information. Federal prosecutors began building a case for formal charges. The primary focus was human trafficking under aggravated circumstances, including coercion, threats, the involvement of a minor. Karina was 19 when she first met Homer, and participation in an organized operation. Authorities were also investigating other women connected to Homer, aiming to establish a wider pattern of exploitation that could support additional charges. Even without a recovered body, the search for Karina focused on every location connected to Homer, including properties he had rented, places he frequented, and transportation hubs. Despite multiple raids, investigators found little direct evidence related to Karina. However, during one operation, they recovered personal belongings belonging to another young woman. She later came forward, alleging that she too had been abused by Homer. Her testimony strengthened the case and supported a broader indictment by the spring of 2018. The investigation then entered a new phase. Authorities formed an international search task force, suspecting Karina may have been taken out of the country to locations such as Canada or the Dominican Republic. Requests were sent to Interpol, but none of her biometric data matched any border records abroad. All indications now pointed to two grim possibilities. Either Karina was no longer alive, or she was being held somewhere in the United States, completely cut off from the outside world. The FBI continued expanding the pool of suspects. At least 6 individuals connected to Homer and the ad postings were officially named in the case. However, none could confirm seeing Karina after September 20th, and none provided credible information about her whereabouts. The investigation ran into a familiar and deeply frustrating obstacle: no body, no direct witness, and no definitive endpoint. Still, the growing body of evidence, including dozens of gigabytes of data, testimony from multiple women, and extensive digital traces, painted a compelling picture. Everything indicated that Karina's disappearance was part of a larger criminal operation, not a voluntary decision. Her case became a stark example of how vulnerable a person can be in the digital age. How a young woman can disappear within weeks, slipping into the shadows. Even with a nationwide search effort attempting to bring her back into the light. By 2022, the federal investigation into the disappearance of Karina Slusser had officially concluded. The evidence collected over several years was sufficient to bring charges against Isaiah A.C. Homer, who was found guilty of human trafficking and the exploitation of women. At least 6 young women were confirmed as victims of his crimes. Although Karina was not the central figure in the indictment, her disappearance remained unsolved. Numerous circumstantial clues pointed to Homer's likely involvement. The U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole and ordered him to pay restitution to several of the women he exploited. The sentencing marked a rare moment in cases like this, where a trafficker received a significant prison sentence even without a recovered body or direct physical evidence. Meanwhile, attention also returned to Jovan Pajero. His arrest on August 25, 2017 remained the only documented legal action taken against him. He was never formally charged in connection with Karina's disappearance, despite his pivotal role in bringing her to New York, the moment that marked the turning point in her story. He was not named as a suspect in the federal case. Karina's name was mentioned in court not as a witness or a defendant, but as a symbol, a victim who vanished in the blurred space between the internet, the streets, and a system that moved too slowly. Her case forced a shift in how law enforcement approaches crimes involving digital exploitation and vulnerable young women. But for her mother, no verdict could ever provide closure. Karina's body was never recovered, and her disappearance remains officially unsolved. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.